Hey guys, Dave Rhodes here from the 100M Design Team. If you've been reading our blog this month, you know we've been talking a lot about this core element of movement DNA called Jesus is Lord. Alan Hirsch, Neil Cole, among others, have been writing about this in the past month and really for the past decade, articulating how important this three-word statement was in catalyzing the movement of the early church. Alan said many times, it's a whole worldview caught in just three words. It's a way that the early church catalyzed vision for the movement. And when we think about being churches that are movemental in nature, it's important for us too to think about the words that we're using to catalyze movement. That's why at 100M we're trying to move some of the paradigm shifts that many of you experienced over the past 10 years into practices, core competencies that we can work on as leaders to create movemental impulse in all that we say and do. So the core competency we want to talk about today is around identity declaring. It's the way we form Jesus is Lord statements for the movements that we feel like God is calling us to lead. Now, this is a really important deal because as leaders, we know that one of the most powerful tools that we have is the language we speak. If leaders create culture, one of our most powerful tools is the language that we use to talk about the things that God's called us to do. And today, just for a few moments, I want to introduce you to one of our master tools when it comes to this core competency of identity declaring. Now, identity declaring is made up of two parts. First, you need to know who you are. But second, you need to be able to articulate who you are so that others can grab hold of the things that God is doing in your midst. The core tool that I want to introduce you to today is one that fellow design team member Will Mancini created several years ago with this team from Auxano. It's not only a tool, but a process that has helped churches all over the country and really around the world begin to form their Jesus is Lord statement. Now, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of this tool, not simply because Will's a good friend of mine, although Will is a great friend of mine. I'm a big fan of this tool because even before I met Will, when Will came into an organization that me and several other people were leading, he introduced us to this tool in a way that helped focus our vision. Now, we were not an organization that was short on vision. We had all kinds of vision. And honestly, we were pretty good at articulating things. But what we needed was a tool to help focus our vision, help us articulate a vision in a way that the people within the movement that we were trying to create could grab hold of it. So when Will came into our company, he talked about this tool called the vision frame. I'm just going to draw up here on the board a frame that helps you think through what your vision looks like. In the middle of it, I'm just going to write the words vision proper. In other words, this is the future reality that you sense that God is calling you to move toward. Now, when Will was introducing us to this tool, he said, in order to frame up that vision proper, you need several things to help you do that. First of all, you need a clear understanding of what your mission is. You might think about this as a mission statement or a mission mandate, knowing what you're called to do. Second, he said, you need to identify some core values, core four values that articulate why it is what you do is so important. Kind of like not your vision mandate, but your vision, your mission motives. Thirdly, you need to articulate strategies that help put the mission statement and values into practice. It's your missional map. And finally, articulate some mission measures that help people know when you've won. Now, when I was leading a company called Wayfarer with several other people, this was an enormous tool to help us articulate what we were doing. For several years, we felt like we were helping the church reach 20-somethings, but even more than reach 20-somethings, we wanted to be a catalyst for awakening the kinds of things that God wanted to do in the next generation of people. As Will began to come into our ministry and help us gain clear focus, one of the ways that we started describing that in regard to our mission statement is this: Wayfarer lives to awaken lives to rediscover Christ. Now, it's just a simple statement that allowed us to communicate that we were about awakening. We were about awakening people, not just to anything, but a rediscovery of Christ. We felt like Christ had been lost inside of Christianity, and part of what we wanted to do was be a group of people who were helping people rediscover this. When I was the U.S. team leader with my wife Kim at 3DM, one of the ways that we talked about our mission is that we wanted to put discipleship and mission back into the hands of ordinary people. Now, as a pastor at Grace Fellowship Church in Snellville, Georgia, when we talk about our mission, here's what we say we want to do. We want to make disciples of the nations, neighborhoods, and next generation. It helps focus all we do around that mission mandate. Not just simply a mission statement or mandate, though. We need values that help articulate the why. At Wayfarer, we had 5 core values that helped articulate why we did everything that we did. First value was this: Christ before Christianity, because following a person is different than fitting into an institution. We before me, because I may be good, but we are better. Go before no, because sometimes the promised land is only realized as you begin to walk. That was our faith value. Rhythm before regimen, because greatness has to be inspired before it can be managed. I just talked about our rhythms and how we were going to do that. And finally, wrestle before settle, because sometimes simplicity is found only on the other side of complexity. Those 5 value statements began to dictate how our culture was going to be shaped. These 5 values: Christ before Christianity. If we had to make a decision between fitting into Christianity and choosing to follow Christ, we wanted to be an organization that was choosing Christ. We before me. It was about self-sacrifice for the sake of the community. These 5 values began to create a sense of tribe among us. How we were working together and why we were doing that. It was our missional motive, so to speak. In regard to strategies, this answers the how question. How are you going to do those things? When I'm working in a church, it's at like Grace Fellowship, it's an identification of what are our vehicles. So even though at Grace Fellowship, we're trying to make disciples of the neighborhoods, nations, and next generations, we have strategies to be able to do that. We have a strategy to multiply at every single level of our church. So we want to multiply disciples, but we also want to multiply leaders. So we have a vehicle called a huddle to help do that. We have a vehicle called missional community or house church to help multiply mid-sized groups of people. And finally, we want to multiply campuses so that as these house churches get together, they can actually gather together in a way that's inspiring to the movement that God is creating. Finally, at the end, you want to be able to articulate what your mission measures is. How you know when you're successful. One of the ways I'm doing that at Grace Fellowship Church right now is I'm trying to articulate to our congregation what it might look like for us to raise the standard, so to speak. One of the ways we're talking about that is our extraordinary norms of grace. What are the 5 things that we want every believer to become normal at? We call them extraordinary norms because we want them to be our normal. We know these are extraordinary things. First one is this: we want everyone to hear the voice of God and act on it. We want everyone, secondly, to reflect and be growing in their reflection of the character and the competency of Jesus. In other words, we want you to look more like Jesus next year than you do this year. We want to be able to do more of the things Jesus did next year than we can do this year. So we want to hear the voice of God and act on it. We want to grow in our reflection of the character and competency of Jesus. We want everyone to live with a strong sense of identity and calling. We want everyone to know who they are and what they're called to do. 4, we want everyone to participate in and eventually lead a missional family. And fifthly, we want everyone to be able to help someone else do the same. That's the way that we are articulating when we're successful. Now at Wayfarer, where we were trying to awaken lives, we were awakening movement, we talked about our mission measured this way. We had 6 core questions that we were answering with everything that we did. When we'd go to an event, when we were writing a project, these are the 6 questions that developed our win. 1, were you disturbed by what we did? 2, were you inspired? These were 2 formative questions because we believe that as you got to know Jesus, you were both inspired by him, but also a bit disturbed by him. Thirdly, were you challenged to think differently about God? We were a paradigm-shifting organization, and so we wanted people to think differently. We wanted to create environments that challenged people to think differently. Fourthly, were you free to be yourself? In other words, were we creating an atmosphere where even though we were challenging you about what you thought about God, we wanted you to be able to speak your mind, to be free about a sense of who you were and be able to express that well. 5, were you dared to love boldly? And finally, sixth question we were always asking is, could you identify one next step to do after we were gone? Again, these four parts of the vision frame help to focus our language in a way that other people can grab hold of. So here's the question today. How are you talking about the things that God's placed on your heart? How are you answering the what question, the why question, the how question, and the when question? Are you doing it in a way that other people can grab hold of? And why not take a stab at using this tool to be able to help you do it more clearly and articulately, more accessibly, so that more people can grab onto the things that God's called you to build out? Now, if you're interested more in this journey, part of what we're creating at 100M is a leap year project that helps us take on different elements of MD&A and go after them for a series of 6 or 8 months at a time. We have a couple months off, so it's a 10-month process, but it's about 8 different times that you are together in a group of people going through different tracks that help you build out a core element of MD&A. One of those elements is called identity declaring. We're signing up people for it now. If you're interested in taking a deeper dive, this might be something you want to think about. So again, just want to introduce you to this core tool, give you some illustrations about the way that that's worked in my leadership, the things that I've been working around the last dozen years or so. I'm really thankful for Will, not just as a friend, but for introducing me to this tool. Again, had lots of vision, but needed someone to help me focus it. So hope it's been helpful to you as well, and we'll see you back in here again at the 100M blog. Thanks so much.